Chapter 34. Magic Night on the Volga. To the left of the Volga State River shipping passenger docks, under a sign that read, "Don't lean on the railings, watch your belongings, keep off the walls," stood the Grand Combinator with his friend and closest assistant, Kisa Vorobyaninov. Mournful cries of the steamboats startled the leader. Lately, he'd become as skittish as a rabbit. A sleepless night in the hard carriage of the Moscow-Nizhny Novgorod mail train had left shadows, blotches, and dusty wrinkles on Ippolit Matveevich's face. Flags snapped above the piers. Smoke, as curly as cauliflower, billowed from the steamboat funnels. Loading was underway on the Anton Rubinstein, docked at Pier Number 2. Stevedores plunged iron hooks into bales of cotton. Cast iron pots stood in formation on the pier, along with piles of wet salted hides, coils of wire, crates of sheet glass, balls of twine, two-toned, bony agricultural machines, wooden pitchforks, baskets covered in burlap filled with young cherries, and barrels of herring. At Pier Number 4, the motor ship Paris Commune was docked. It wasn't scheduled to head downriver until 6 in the evening, but even now, at 11 in the morning, passengers who had arrived from Moscow that morning strolled along its clean, white decks. The Scriabin was nowhere to be seen. This greatly worried Ippolit Matveevich. "What are you so anxious about?" Ostap asked. "Imagine the Scriabin is here. How would you get on it? Even if we had the money to buy a ticket, it wouldn't work. That ship doesn't take passengers." Ostap had managed to chat with the hydraulic press operator, a fitter named Mechnikov, on the train and had learned everything from him. The Scriabin, chartered by the People's Commissariat of Finance, was supposed to make a trip from Nizhny to Tsaritsyn, stopping at every pier and holding a lottery drawing for a winning loan. For this purpose, an entire institution had traveled from Moscow: a lottery commission, a clerical staff, a brass band, a virtuoso balalaika player, a radio engineer, a cameraman, correspondents from central newspapers, and the Columbus Theater. The theater was to perform plays along the way that popularized the idea of state loans. Until Tsaritsyn, the theater was fully supported by the lottery commission, and then it planned to embark on a major tour of the Caucasus at its own risk with its production of The Marriage. Scriabin was late. They promised it would arrive from the backwater, where the final preparations were being made, only by evening. Therefore, the entire apparatus that had arrived from Moscow had set up camp on the pier while waiting to board. Delicate girls with suitcases and garment bags sat on coils of wire, guarding their typewriters and looking warily at the dockworkers. A citizen with a purple goatee perched on a millstone. A stack of enameled signs lay on his lap. On the top one, a curious person could read, "Department of Mutual Settlements." Writing desks on pedestals and other, more modest tables stood stacked on top of each other. A guard strolled near a sealed, fireproof safe. A task correspondent had already settled down at the edge of the pier, and dangling his legs over the side was fishing. The fish weren't biting, and the correspondent grumbled irritably, changing his bait. Representative from Stenko, Persitsky, looked through Zeiss binoculars with 8-fold magnification at the fairgrounds, then shuffled his feet, determined that there were still 5 hours until the Scriabin's arrival, and took the Kremlin elevator up to the city. In 5 hours, he could gather a wealth of material, write an essay about the city, about the Bonch-Bruvich radio laboratory, and about the consequences of the flood. To the shade of a hydraulic press, Agafia Tikhonovna sat on a Vorobyaninov chair and flirted with the virtuoso balalaika player, a proper young man with European manners. The virtuoso felt perfectly at home in this kindred environment. He gracefully settled onto one of the Vorobyaninov chairs, completely ignoring the fact that Galkin, Palkin, Malkin, Chalkin, and Zalkind were all forced to make do with only 2 chairs among the 5 of them. Concessionaires paced around the chairs like jackals. Ostap was particularly outraged by the virtuoso balalaika player. "Who's that little twerp?" he whispered to Ippolit Matveevich. "Every fool is sitting on your chairs. It's all the result of your vulgar womanizing." "Why are you picking on me?" Vorobyaninov whined. "I don't even know such a word, womanizing." "That's a shame. Womanizing means to court young girls with impure intentions. Your denials are hopeless. Lisa told me everything. All of Moscow is rolling with laughter. Everyone knows about your womanizing." The companions circled the chairs, bickering quietly. Galkin, Palkin, Malkin, Chalkin, and Zalkind made predictions about the future. Malkin didn't believe in the quality of the lottery meals. "In the contract," he said, "we should have specified the number of dishes and the number of calories. As a rule, we should be equated with metal workers, no less than 4,000 calories per meal." Galkin and Palkin held more optimistic views. "But caviar is cheap here," they reported, "and fish." "And what air?" Chalkin shouted. "Sea air." "All the more reason," said Zalkind, thin as a whip. "With such air you constantly want to eat. I want to eat right now. We won't starve before Tsaritsyn. They'll feed us." "And what will happen in the Caucasus if Sestrin has already grabbed 20 marks for himself? And we get 1.5 marks each if the play flops. Yeah, we'll be earning 15 kopecks a day." Virtuoso balalaika player invited Agafia Tikhonovna to have lunch on the Paris Commune. "Will they let us in?" "Of course they'll let us in. The kitchen lives off this at the stops. They have very good and cheap lunches here." The sound crew sighed and shuffled off to the Raft Tavern. The concessionaires perked up. Maybe we should risk it, Ostap said suddenly, involuntarily approaching the chairs. You're two and I'm two and let's go. That would be good, damn it. Looked around, they would have to run along the embankment to Rojdestvenskaya Street, which was clogged with carts, and it wouldn't be easy to push through the crowd of dockworkers. Besides, Kochgerv and Podkolson were lurking nearby. They would certainly raise a terrible ruckus if they noticed an attempt on the furniture, supposedly made in the FORTINBRAS woodworking shops under the UMSLOPOGS named after Balthazar. Ostap deflated. We'll have to go, but how? In a pinch, we could get on the Paris Commune, go to Tsaritsyn and wait for the troop there, but the money. Ah, Kisa, damn you. Have you realized your vulgarity yet? The companions decided to at least sit on the chairs. They bounced on the springs and moved from chair to chair. Ippolit Matveyevich fidgeted. The irony of fate, Ostap said. Pauper millionaires, haven't you felt anything yet? Podkolson and Kochgerv approached the institutional courier, and shaking their heads in the direction of the concessionaires, inquired who dared to sit on their material assets. Well, they'll be chased away now, Ostap concluded. A guard approached. Which department are you comrades from? From the Department of Mutual Settlements, said the observant Ostap. But even this didn't help. The courier left and immediately returned with Comrade Ludwig. Comrade Ludwig drove the concessionaires away from the chairs and ran to the pier, which the scriban was already approaching, turning against the current. On its sides, it bore plywood shields on which giant bonds were depicted in rainbow colors. Steamboat roared, imitating the cry of a mammoth, or perhaps another animal that had replaced the steamboat siren in prehistoric times. The financial theatrical camp came to life. Lottery employees ran down the city slopes. Plump Platten Plagsuk rolled toward the steamboat in a cloud of dust. Galkin, Palkin, Malkin, Chalkin, and Zalkind ran out of the Raft Tavern. Dockworkers were already toiling over the fireproof safe. Acrobatic instructor Georgette Turispolskaya ran up the gangplank with a gymnastic stride. Simbivich, concerned about the material assets, stretched his arms toward the Kremlin heights, then toward the captain standing on the bridge. The cameraman carried his equipment high above the heads of the crowd, and still on the move, demanded a four-berth cabin to set up a laboratory in it. In the general melee, Ippolit Matveyevich made his way to the chairs, and beside himself, began to drag one chair aside. Drop the chair, Bender shouted. Have you gone mad? We'll take one chair and the rest will be lost to us forever. You'd better think about how to get on the ship. Musicians passed along the pier, girded with brass instruments. They looked with disgust at the saxophones, flexitones, beer bottles, and S-mark mugs with which the sound crew was armed. Enema gang, said a clarinet, as he drew level with the mighty five. Galkin, Palkin, Malkin, Chalkin, and Zalkin said nothing, but they harbored revenge in their hearts. The lottery wheels were brought in a Ford van. It was a complex structure made up of 6 rotating cylinders, gleaming with copper and glass. Setting it up on the lower deck took a long time. The commotion and bickering continued until late in the evening. The Columbus troupe, offended that they had been placed in second class, expansively attacked the author of the play and the director, Nick Sestrin. Well, is it worth getting upset? Nick Sestrin mumbled. The cabins are excellent, comrades. I think everything is fine. You think so, Galkin exclaimed hotly, because you yourself have settled in first class. Galkin, the director said ominously. What Galkin? You're already starting to corrupt. Me, what about Palkin? What about Malkin? Won't Chalkin and Zalkin tell you the same thing? Finally, where are we going to rehearse? And the entire mighty group demanded in one voice a separate cabin for rehearsals, and by the way, at least a little money in advance. Go to hell, Nick Sestrin shouted. At such a moment they come up with their demands. Without explaining what moment he meant, the author of the play leaned over the side and called out. Simbayevich. Sindievich. Simbayevich. Miura, have you seen Simbivich? In the lottery hall, they were setting up a stage, nailing posters and slogans to the walls, arranging wooden benches for visitors, and splicing electrical wires to the lottery wheels. Writing desks were placed at the stern, and the clatter of typewriters could be heard from the typist's cabin, interspersed with laughter. A pale man with a purple goatee walked around the ship and hung his enameled signs on the appropriate doors. Department of Mutual Settlements, Personal Desk, General Office, Press Department, Instructors Subdepartment, Chairman of the Commission, Engine Room. The man with the goatee attached smaller signs to the larger ones. No entry without business, no reception, no admittance to unauthorized persons, all inquiries at the registry. The first-class lounge was equipped as an exhibition of banknotes and bonds. This caused a new outburst of indignation from Galkin, Palkin, Malkin, Chalkin, and Zalkind. Where are we going to eat? They worried. And what if it rains? Oh, Nick Sestrin said to his assistant, I can't. Do you think, Sergei, we can do without the sound crew? What are you saying, Nikolai Konstantinovich? The artists are used to the rhythm. And a new uproar arose. The mighty group had sniffed out that the author of the play had dragged all 4 chairs into his cabin. So, the group said with irony, and we have to rehearse sitting on the bunks, and Nikolai Konstantinovich will sit on 4 chairs with his wife, Gusta, who has nothing to do with our collective. Maybe we also want to have our wives on the trip. The Grand Combinator looked angrily at the lottery ship from the shore. Ippolit Matveevich's imposing figure could have passed for a sculpture of despair of an idol. A new burst of cries reached the ears of the concessionaires. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" a member of the commission shouted. "How could I know he would get sick? This is a fine mess." Then go to Rabis and demand that they urgently send us an artist. "Where am I going to go? It's 6 o'clock now. Rabis has been closed for a long time, and the ship leaves in half an hour." "Then you'll have to draw yourself. Since you took responsibility for decorating the ship, you'll have to answer for it as you see fit." Ostap was already running along the gangplank, elbowing dockworkers, young ladies, and simply curious onlookers. He was stopped at the entrance. "Pass. But I need to see this citizen." "All the same, you need a pass." Comrade Bender shouted, You, the plump one who needs an artist." 5 minutes later, the Grand Combinator was sitting in the white cabin of the plump head of the floating lotteries supply department and negotiating the terms of employment. "So, comrade," the plump man was saying, "we'll need the following from you: the execution of artistic posters, inscriptions, and the completion of the banner. Our artist started to do it and got sick. We left him here in the hospital. Well, and of course, general supervision of the artistic part. Can you take this on? And I warn you, there's a lot of work." "Yes, I can take this on. I've had to do such work before." "And you can leave with us right now." "It will be difficult, but I'll try." A large and heavy mountain fell from the shoulders of the head of the supply department. Experiencing a childlike lightness, the plump man looked at the new artist with a radiant gaze. "Your terms?" Ostap asked boldly. "Keep in mind, I'm not a funeral home." "The terms are piecework, according to Rabis rates." Ostap grimaced, which took a great effort. "But in addition, a free table," the plump man added hastily, "and a separate cabin." "In what class?" "In the second, however it can be in the first. I'll arrange it for you." "And return travel?" "At your expense, we don't have credit." "Well, okay," Ostap said with a sigh, "I agree, but I have a boy assistant with me." "As for the boy, I don't know. No credit has been allocated for a boy. At your own expense, please. Let him live in your cabin." "Well, let it be your way. My boy is quick. He's used to Spartan conditions. Will you feed him?" "Let him come to the kitchen. We'll see there." Ostap received a pass for himself, and the quick boy put the key to the cabin in his pocket and went out onto the hot deck. Ostap felt considerable satisfaction at the touch of the key. It was the first time in his turbulent life. There was a key in an apartment. There was only no money, but it was right there nearby in the chairs. The Grand Combinator, with his hands in his pockets, walked along the side, pretending not to notice Vorobyaninov, who had been left on the shore. Ippolit Matveevich first made signs silently, and then even dared to squeak, but Bender was deaf. Turning his back to the chairman of the concession, he carefully watched the procedure of lowering the hydraulic press into the hold. Final preparations for departure were being made. Agafia Tikhonovna, also known as Mura, tapping her high heels, ran from her cabin to the stern, looked into the water, loudly shared her delights with the virtuoso balalaika player, and all this caused confusion in the ranks of the esteemed figures of the lottery enterprise. The ship gave a second blast. The clouds shifted from the terrible sounds. The sun turned crimson and fell behind the horizon. Lamps and lanterns lit up in the upper city. The wheezing of gramophones, competing before the last buyers, reached from the market in the Pekivsky ravine. Deafened and lonely, Ippolit Matveevich shouted something, but he couldn't be heard. The clatter of the winch drowned out all other sounds. Ostap Bender loved effects. Only before the third blast, when Ippolit Matveevich no longer doubted that he had been abandoned to the mercy of fate, did Ostap notice him. "Why are you standing there like you've been jilted? I thought you'd been on the ship for a long time. They're taking away the gangplank now. Run quickly. Let the citizen through. Here's a pass." Ippolit Matveevich, almost crying, ran onto the ship. "Is this your boy?" the head of the supply department asked suspiciously. "The boy," Ostap said, "isn't he bad? A typical boy. Let the first one who says it's a girl throw a stone at me." The plump man walked away gloomily. "Well, Kisa," Ostap remarked, "we'll have to get to work in the morning. I hope you can mix paints. And then this, I'm an artist. I graduated from VKHUTMAS and you're my assistant. If you think that's not the case, then run back to the shore quickly." Black green foam burst from under the stern. The ship shuddered. Cymbals, flutes, cornets, trombones, and basses burst into a wonderful march, and the city, turning and balancing, moved to the left side. Continuing to tremble, the ship went with the current and quickly ran into the darkness. Stars, lamps, and colorful port signs swayed behind. After a minute, the ship moved so far away that the city lights seemed to be frozen rocket powder. Murmur of working underwoods could still be heard, but nature and the Volga were taking their toll. Bliss enveloped everyone sailing on the Skryabin. Members of the lottery commission sipped tea languidly. Tenderness reigned at the first meeting of the local committee, which took place on the bow. Warm wind breathed so noisily, the water lapped so softly at the sides, the black outlines of the shores flew by so quickly, that the chairman of the local committee, a completely positive person who had opened his mouth to give a speech about working conditions in an unusual setting, unexpectedly for everyone and for himself, began to sing. The steamboat sailed on the Volga. The Volga is a Russian river. And the rest of the stern participants in the meeting rumbled the chorus. Lilac blooms. Resolution on the report of the chairman of the local committee was never passed. The sounds of a piano were heard. The head of musical accompaniment, Ivanov, feeling tenderness for everyone, extracted the most lyrical notes from the instrument. The virtuoso trailed after Murachka, and unable to find his own words to express his love, muttered the words of a romance. Do not leave, your kisses are burning, I am not yet tired of passionate caress. In the mountain gorges the clouds have not awakened, the pearly star has not faded from the sky. Zimbivich, clinging to the handrails, contemplated the heavenly abyss. Compared to it, the material assets of the marriage seemed to him an outrageous swinishness. He looked with disgust at his hands, which had taken an active part in the material design of the classical comedy. At the moment of greatest languor, Galkin, Palkin, Malkin, Chalkin, and Zalkind, located at the stern, struck their apothecary and beer paraphernalia. They were rehearsing. Mirage dissipated immediately. Agafia Tikhonovna yawned and, ignoring the sighing virtuoso, went to sleep. The general agreement sounded again in the souls of the local committee members, and they took up the resolution. Simbivich, after mature reflection, came to the conclusion that the design of the marriage was not so bad after all. An irritated voice from the darkness called Georgette Turaspolskaya to a meeting with the director. Dogs barked in the villages. It became fresh. In the first-class cabin, Ostap, lying with his shoes on the leather sofa and thoughtfully looking at the cork belt covered with green canvas, interrogated Ippolit Matveyevich. Can you draw? That's a pity. I unfortunately can't either. He thought and continued. Can you draw letters? You can't either. That's not good at all. After all, we got here as artists. Well, we can stall for 2 days and then they'll throw us out. In these 2 days, we must manage to do everything we need to do. The situation has become somewhat difficult. I learned that the chairs are in the director's cabin, but that's not so scary in the end. The important thing is that we're on the ship. Until we're thrown out, all the chairs must be inspected. It's too late today. The director is sleeping in his cabin. How does that sound? I tried to keep the humor and spirit of the original while making it more accessible to a modern American English reader. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments.